was so high. Also, this funnel cloud was spotted in the skies over Wilmington, Newcastle County. People in that area took cover for nearly an hour during last night's tornado warnings. Now, this morning, we are staying settled. Take a look at that skyline. It'll be sunny most of the day, but we could at least see a few showers, and it is really humid out there already.
With talking about the grand jury. I don't know how well known this is, but folks come in for jury duty and then get signed up for sometimes 18 months or longer to sit as grand jurors in cases that are causing problems in our communities where we have uncooperative witnesses. And the last act of this grand jury was to produce this report that is being provided for you. And I just publicly want to say, thank you to these grand jurors for their incredible commitment. This is not their first report. This is their second report. They did one on the smoke shop epidemic and what we were seeing with this. And then we're finished and came back in to finish their work in this case and in this report. And I think it shows just incredible commitment by a group of people that came in for jury duty one day and then became a part of, I hope, what's going to be solutions to some of the problems. So we're here to discuss an investigation into assaults that took place in Cheltenham High School football locker room. There's been a lot of misinformation, I think, out there in the community about what happened to a 15-year-old football player, and there has been reluctance by most parties, adults and juveniles, to tell what they knew, what they saw, what they heard that day in the locker room and afterwards in the next several weeks. And I'll also say this was on 2 occasions. So the law enforcement folks, many of who are present today, were stymied in terms of our investigation through traditional means of going out and talking to people and investigating things. And we moved this into the grand jury because of that in December 2025 in order to compel testimony under oath to get the facts of the case. We use search warrants, we use investigative means to obtain cell phone records, cell phone videos, and other evidence. So initially, it was believed that there was one incident on September 3rd, 2025 against a sophomore football player. But the investigation moved along, and witness testimony in January revealed the fact that there was a video of an assault in the locker room, not from September 3rd, but from August 15th of 2025. In fact, 2 cell phone videos were able to be recovered by our detectives working the case, and detectives from the Montgomery County Detective Bureau and Cheltenham Township Police Department. And both videos are from the assault on August 15th and record what occurred and capture the main actors that were participants in this. We do not have a video recording of the September 3rd assault. So after hearing months of testimony from more than 25 witnesses and reviewing interview records of the victims and others, the grand jury investigation found that the victim had been assaulted twice in the locker room. The first time, the victim had told no one. Following the second incident on September 3rd, the victim broke down after the assault while being given a ride home by volunteer coach Ralph Burnley, telling Coach Burnley that he had been jumped in the locker room and that started a chain of reactions and actions that were not only problematic, but were the basis of the criminal charges that have been filed against 4 former Cheltenham High School football coaches, head coach Terrence Tolbert, associate head coach Darren DJ McFadden, assistant coach Benjamin Johnson, and Burnley. So I'll share first with you all what happened in the locker room on those two occasions where the victim was assaulted. On both occasions, multiple football players were in the locker room following preseason practice. They were getting changed out of their gear. There were no coaches or adults in the locker room at either time. And that was the information received by the grand jury, and it indicated there was ongoing issues between the juvenile victim and other members of the football team prior to these incidents. The first incident on August 15, 2025 was recorded by two juvenile football players, alleged delinquent juvenile 3 and alleged delinquent juvenile 4, who shared the video with multiple players and other students, but later deleted these videos. One of the videos of the assault and the other from immediately after the assault. And what it showed is several football players, including alleged delinquent juvenile 2, in the locker room, restraining the juvenile victim while their teammate, alleged juvenile delinquent 1, used a broomstick to poke at the victim's legs and buttocks. The football players can be heard laughing and yelling, and at least one player is chanting, "Broomstick him." A second locker room incident occurred on September 3rd, 2025. This incident was reportedly prompted by the team having to run extra conditioning drills assigned by the coaches after it was discovered that the victim took some equipment from another player's locker. Testimony before the grand jury from multiple witnesses described that incident as involving multiple players, including, and I'll name this individual, Isaiah Simpson and other unidentified players, kicking or stomping on the juvenile victim. The incident also involved the use of a broomstick to poke at the victim's buttocks, again by alleged delinquent juvenile 1. Again, there was no video of that was located. So when interviewed, the juvenile victim described the incident as being punched, kicked, and stomped in the head and the groin with cleats, forcing him to curl up to protect himself and his head. The victim also said the players assaulting him were trying to poke him in the butt with the broomstick. He told interviewers at that time of the assault that he was wearing shorts and football equipment. He said the broomstick did not go in but made contact with his butt cheek area over his shorts. The victim said the assault stopped since the buses were coming and all the players had to catch their bus home. Following the assault, the victim got into the car with Coach Burnley, who often gave him a ride home from practice. The victim told Burnley that he had been jumped by his teammates in the locker room and had an injury to his genital area. Cell phone evidence showed that Burnley immediately texted the coaches in the group chat from the car and made a call to the head coach, Coach Tolbert. And that call prompted subsequent communications among Tolbert, Burnley, assistant coach McFadden, and assistant coach Johnson, including text messages and a group phone call with the juvenile victim. The victim testified that McFadden and Tolbert told him not to tell his mother about the incident because they would handle it. The evidence showed the coaches discussed the incident. They talked about the incident putting the football season in jeopardy and that they needed to address the incident within the team rather than outside of the team. The coaches did not contact the boy's mother or tell school administrators at that time about the assault. Testimony showed that the victim's mother learned of the assault 4 days later on September 7th and took her son to urgent care on September 8th, where he was diagnosed with a contusion to his penis. The evidence further showed that no report was made to school administration by members of the team or the coach staff immediately after the September 3rd incident, and that the first child line report was filed on September 18th, 2025. Cheltenham school administrators ultimately suspended the football season on October 17, 2025, and canceled the season on October 19, 2025, citing allegations of hazing. So following the conclusion of the testimony, the grand jury voted to charge 4 adult coaches, 2 18-year-old football players who are charged as adults, and 4 juvenile football players, including the male who led the assaults and wielded the broomstick. The adults charged are 4 of the coaches: Terrence Tolbert, Darian DJ McFadden, Benjamin Johnson, and Ralph Burnley. Each is charged with 2 counts of endangering the welfare of children, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit endangering the welfare of children. 2 football players are charged as adults: Isaiah Simpson, who is an active participant in the assaults of the victim, is charged with conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, 2 counts of simple assault, recklessly endangering another person, unlawful restraint, false imprisonment, conspiracy to each of the charges. Josiah Peeler is charged with false swearing for lying to law enforcement. 2 of the juveniles are charged, are active participants in the assault and face multiple charges, from aggravated assault to hazing to unlawful restraint, while 2 others are charged with conspiracy to commit hazing, plus other charges such as perjury and tampering with evidence. So each of the 10 people being charged, adult or juvenile, have been notified of the charges. We understand some have already turned themselves in or in the process of scheduling times to turn themselves into the police. They'll be processed and arraigned before a magisterial district judge, where bail will be set for them. The juveniles will be processed within the juvenile court system. And beyond the criminal charges, a member of the grand jury felt it was imperative to issue a report on this, in addition to the findings in the presentment. And so, I'll kind of finish where I started here. The report calls for legislative action to make hazing a reportable offense by mandated reporters, such as teachers, coaches, school administrators, and medical professionals. There's a state senator, Art Haywood, who represents the district where this occurred, and State Representative Napoleon Nelson. I have provided each of them a copy of the report. I emailed it before coming over to see you all. Currently, child-on-child contact such as hazing is not required to be reported when committed by a peer. Making hazing a reportable offense would strengthen protection for students and give parents, we hope, a little more peace of mind. We're ready to work with the Pennsylvania legislators on making a change to the law suggested by the grand jurors. So before I take questions on this, I want to be clear about a couple things. The assaults on this victim were not the typical goofing around by teammates or horseplay, as some of the coaches in this case called it. They were crimes. Numerous witnesses, many reluctant to share what they saw and knew, testified before the grand jury about what occurred in the Cheltenham High School locker room on these 2 occasions, and testified about actions taken by some of the football coaches after the assaults. And after carefully considering all of the testimony and evidence, the grand jury recommended the charges that I've outlined today, and they have been filed with the courts. So I'll take questions now.
Kevin, when you talk about Mr. Burnley initially notifying the coaches, but then not taking it further, can you explain why how that leads to criminal charges, even though it could be argued that he did tell his higher-ups?
Okay, so, and Jim, I think, this, as in many cases, what happens after the incident is the thing that leads to charges, and what people do in those circumstances. Instead of addressing the problem the right way, they chose a different path. And what I'll do is I'll point you to the report on page 4. They wanted to cover this up. In a September 3rd text message conversation, Burnley said what I think we can refer to as the quiet part out loud, this has to be handled and kept quiet. It's just like hazing. I'm telling you, if this gets out, they could put the whole team in jeopardy. And one of the other coaches responds to that. If this gets out, we are effed. They will cancel the whole season. So, these coaches knew what was going on in the beginning. They said it, and they went a different way. They didn't tell administrators. They decided to handle it. They told the juvenile victim not to tell his mother, and that's part of the problem here. That this was mishandled on a lot of different levels, and it took the Montgomery County grand jury a long period of time to get this to where we knew the facts in this case are, and so that's where it goes with the coaches there. Any other questions?
Is there an argument to be made that this was a mandatory reporting incident because until the investigation was done, you couldn't tell if it was sexual conduct?
Yeah. So, I think at one point they got forced to, because of some of the allegations, and they did report to Childline, or the administration did. So, and that's what gets us going into this. Other than that, we're not involved. I believe the Cheltenham School District has taken the position that they don't want police in their schools, or school resource officers, and so it's on them to address these issues, and you'll see too. I mean, I think the grand jury is critical of the administration's investigation into this. It was failed on a couple different levels. So, so the grand jury took care of what the school did not.
Kevin, given the nature of the details of this assault, what prevented it from being considered sexual assault?
So, in this case, the victim, and if you see the video, I mean, he clearly believes that they're gonna use this broomstick
Right.
on him. The evidence that we established through a number of means, and really review after review on this, it led us to the evidence, and led the grand jury to the evidence that this was an assault, as opposed to a sexual assault. There was not penetration or something along those lines. So, the grand jury came to the conclusions that they did, or recommendations on this, which we've followed through and then charged. Yes, sir.
Alluded to frustration by not getting information by your detectives. Was it others other than players or coaches that were withholding information or not being as forthcoming as possible with some of this? And is it typical for investigation grand jury to last this long?
Well, the grand jury goes on for periods of time. I mean, this was 6 months. The other report that the grand jury did was a 10-month investigation. So, yeah, the grand jury meets, and they're not just looking at one case. They're looking at a lot of different cases. So, the frustration, though, and the reason we have to use a grand jury at times is where you have uncooperative folks. And, I think if you look at the conclusions by the grand jury on this, they were frustrated with a lot of different levels, with the actions of the kids in this, the actions of the adult football players in the room, and leadership in the room, the coaches that were involved with this, and the administration. Yes, ma'am.
Get back to the question of sexual assault and making that determination. Is there an explanation for why it would not be considered attempted sexual assault if it did seem like there was an intent to use the broomstick in that manner?
Well, as I said before, I believe the child, the victim, felt that, but from the evidence, it did not show that happened. It didn't go under, his clothing. He didn't do, those type of things, which would support the charge. And look, we have to follow the evidence where it takes us. We don't get to surmise different things. We have, evidence from testimony, including, the victim's statements about what happened, and also we have, evidence from video and other witnesses on the thing. So that's the charge is assault, and, different levels of assault because of different participants, but that's what evidence was supported in this investigation. Yes, ma'am.
Follow up, what do you think and feel when it comes to this child being failed on multiple levels, whether that's by a coach he confided in, by his teammates, or by the adults that are higher up in the school?
I'm going to read again because I think it answers your question better than I can probably articulate it. We had an expert that testified before the grand jury, and as part of the report, and I turn you to page 7 on this. In any given hazing disclosure, a significant majority of the community supports the status quo. The community is generally behind the coaches and the school district. Those supporting the perpetrators may diminish hazing and oust victims and supporters, labeling them as weak. Those who support the victim or their family are ostracized by the larger group or community. The victims, their families, and their supporters are made to feel like they did something wrong or are blamed for the hazing itself. This can continue for months or years, and Dr. Lipkin described this as the second hazing. This can be devastating to victims as well as to the school and community. When athletic seasons are postponed or coaches are fired, the reaction is often immense. The victims are the ones blamed, and usually there is no empathy for the physical and psychological pain they endure. So, our job is not to do what some in the public would think, who are supporting those type of things outlined by the good doctor. Our job is to follow the evidence where it leads to whomever it leads, and prosecute the individuals that have committed crimes. That's what we're doing. That's what the recommendations of this grand jury lead to. And if other people aren't going to support a victim in this, we are. Any other questions? All right, thanks, everybody.
Kevin, I'm sorry, one more quickly.